Good morning. It's your dear old friend, Geri Atrik. And I'm going to have another little anecdote about Turnip River Road. Um, it was during the Depression, so people had to figure out ways to exist, how to make money. And there was one man who we called Horseradish Eddie. And that's what he did. He made horseradish and would, sell it door to door. And I'll tell you, it was so strong that it would bring tears to your eyes just smelling it. And of course, my grandmother would always set him over the edge when she'd say, "Eddie, did you put turnip in it to cut it?" And he would, ran and raged that he'd be accused of doing that. But anyway, he was one of our characters. Another thing that I remember is driving from the country down to town, and after you go through Bull's Head, we would turn left onto Bedford Street, and there was a rather elegant house there, and it was owned by Mr. Ferris, who was a miser, and he would put out his fire in the stove when he went to town because he didn't want to burn the extra coal. And my mother would, see him standing out in front of the house and would give him a ride into town. But he owned an extensive real estate in downtown Stamford, where their apartment houses were built on them. Not right in downtown, but just on the outskirts of it. And it was his land where Ringling Brothers Circus used to come every year. That is now a tremendous shopping center, et cetera, et cetera. But for days there was no sign of Mr. Ferris, and it was during the winter time, and somebody, went to the house to investigate to see whether he was okay or not. And they found that he was frozen to death, I guess the fire had run out or whatever, and he didn't have any coal. But that's what happened, and then people went in there, or the police did, and they found money all over the place. Anyway, he was just too cheap to buy, coal. The other thing I remember was that my grandfather owned like 6 houses on Turnip River Road, and he had built them all out of lumber that when he tore down the big barn on the farm, he built these houses, and of which 3 of them he had given one to each of 3 daughters, so they all lived in a row there. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was he also owned tenement houses down in Stamford, and there was one area that was sort of I wouldn't say, it was where the different waves of immigrants came to Stamford. First it was the Irish, it was an area called Pacific Street, and it's no longer there. And, the Irish came, the Italians, and the blacks, and the Jews, and et cetera. So it was a melting pot place where they started. And he owned a lot of the buildings there. And on Friday nights, or maybe it was Saturday nights, he would take the bus from Turnover Road, and he would go down there to collect the rents. Knock on the door, and he'd be standing there and what's the money for the rent. And in all those years, he had no fear of doing it. I mean, it shows you the difference in time versus today. And then he would take the bus back at night. So that concludes my story for today.